Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. With only about a week left until the new Star Wars movie premieres, news about the franchise is really peaking here online. And as usual, this means many in the so-called PC police on the left, they're taking notice of this project. And they're finding ways to both attack Star Wars haters and those involved with the films as well, especially those who won't bend the knee completely to the left in their social justice related causes. For example, today we're going to be talking about why one of the stars of the new Star Wars trilogy, Daisy Ridley, well, we're going to talk about why she's come under attack, actually. This is a bit new for the Star Wars SJWs too, since they are usually defending Daisy and propping her up, her being this sort of girl power, wannabe feminist icon type character for them. But this time, the social justice warriors are doing what they always eventually do. They're turning on their own for the slightest infraction, proving they can never really be fully pleased. And also, no one is safe according to their strict social Marxist influenced worldviews and political stances. This time, what's triggered the left-wingers is the fact that Daisy Ridley isn't acknowledging her so-called privilege, which is a must if you're a white person among their circles, apparently. You see, privilege is the SJW way of saying, hey, white people, you don't deserve what you have. We didn't earn anything or work hard or have any good luck even. No, according to these out-of-control leftists who hate anyone who's not a minority, well, they say European descendant people all have some sort of privilege. This sort of undefined, amorphous, unproven source of our supposed benefits and advantages. And their claim is that this is the real reason our people do so well in the world. And it's why we have such great families, cities, countries, nations, continents, and world history as well. Privilege is also the left's way of saying whites are all racist too, since according to their bullshit theory, all of our people only succeeded because we're racist to others. It's total baloney, of course, and it's not true to say the least. And it all just tracks back to their constant hate and ironic racism toward us, really. Regardless, this privilege attack has been slung at Daisy Ridley now from Star Wars. And today we're going to talk about why, what happened, and discuss more reasons why the whole privilege premise is just plain wrong. An article from Yahoo has more details. It's called Star Wars actor Daisy Ridley faces backlash over comments on privilege. This should be good. Let's go ahead and check it out. Daisy Ridley has received criticism for comments she made about the role of privilege in her life. In an interview with The Guardian, Ridley, who attended boarding school, denied that her upbringing had instilled her with confidence and made navigating her celebrity status any easier. The reporter asked if she'd found it easier to be confident and navigate her celebrity because of the privilege in her life. The 27-year-old, who was brought up in Maida Vale, said, "The privilege I have? How? No, genuinely, how?" The Star Wars actor insisted her experiences were not too different from her co-star John Boyega, who grew up in Peckham as the son of Nigerian immigrant parents. "I think me and him are similar enough that, no," she went on. And if you think about it, two wannabe actors growing up in Britain could seem pretty similar at face value. But when you apply the proper SJW filters, we can quickly see why this response from Daisy angered them. Regardless of the fact that she's probably right here and her and Boyega likely had similar amounts of so-called privilege, but when you look through the eyes of an SJW, they see the world rather differently. But when you realize how they view things, which we're about to go over, well, it's pretty apparent to a sane person that they are not only wrong, they're also pretty biased and basically extremely racist for judging people this way. You see, since Daisy is a woman, she does have some inherent privilege herself, according to left-wing logic. Being a woman could, say, raise your victimhood levels up to about 50%, but Daisy being white and British doesn't really help her cause. In fact, it might even lower her levels down to, say, 30% victim. But as for minorities like John Boyega, who's of Nigerian descent, well, that would put him at about 75% victim. But he does lose some points for being a straight male, so that probably docks him down to, say, 60% victim. And then, when you put all this math together, that still makes Boyega about twice as much victim as Ridley. So according to SJW logic, he wins the victimhood Olympics here. Thus, he gets defended here, which means that's why Daisy is getting shit on for daring to say they are on a similar footing. That might seem true to sane people like us, but according to radical leftists who have taken over the Star Wars fan base as of late, well, they will never side with a white person over a black, no matter what the details or circumstances may be. And while they are obviously trying to help and be politically correct here, but at the same time, this also comes off as highly bigoted to me. Ridley clarified she went to a performing arts boarding school, which she described as different. The newspaper reports that the actor's publicist also said she went to the school on a scholarship. However, her comments were met with backlash as they were discussed on social media. One Twitter user wrote, "Really can't believe that Daisy Ridley had the audacity and nerve to compare her privately educated, rich, privileged life as a member of a family who's part of the establishment establishment as similar to Boyega's experiences as someone who grew up in a deprived area to immigrant parents. Geez, guys, get a grip already. Sure, she may have misspoke here slightly. Perhaps she didn't know the full backstory on John Boyega, but really, I think this is an overreaction and an overcorrection on the part of the SJWs attacking her. This is clearly stemming from their hatred of her and others with her skin tone and background. And it all seems odd and pretty sad, especially considering who they're going after here. Daisy Ridley is pretty much harmless and has never done anything wrong. Sure, you can debate things about her character Rey in the Star Wars movies, and you can talk about how much you love or hate those movies until your face turns blue, but most of that negative stuff is out of her hands. And all these projects are mostly out of Daisy's control. She's just one actor in a larger picture and production and film series. And she just happened to get lucky enough to be cast in this new trilogy about 5 years ago when it started. Surely it's not her fault this all went feminist for Star Wars. And it's hard to blame her for these movies sometimes coming out shitty, like what happened with The Last Jedi. Combine this lack of much blame with the fact that Daisy is pretty damn hot and also seems very nice, charismatic, and fun to be around, just like how she's fun to watch on screen. And well, putting this all together and these detractors turning on Daisy about privilege are making a big mistake. It's like when they go after our boy Chris Pratt, like how we discussed in our last video. These leftists going after pretty likable, squeaky clean people like Pratt and Ridley, it just makes them look bad and worse. And these bogus accusations they raise against people like this, well, it just makes me think they don't like them because they're white, which is really where this whole privilege argument comes from in the first place. Much like with other SJW terms like, say, cultural appropriation, well, that and privilege and pushing for so-called diversity, that's just the left's low-key word game ways to attack a group and race they just plainly don't like. In the interview, Ridley claimed her confidence could be put down to coming from a large chatty family. She isn't the first member of her family to step into show business, as her great-uncle Arnold Ridley OBE was an actor playing Private Godfrey in Dad's Army. Meanwhile, her grandfather John Ridley OBE was head of engineering at the BBC from 1950 to 1965. Boyega, who plays Finn in the space opera, has previously spoken about having to apply for a hardship fund to join Theatre Peckham as a youngster as he pursued his interest in acting. Okay, well, while I won't deny it does sound like Daisy might have come from a slightly better family, but that's hardly a high crime, and it's also not really her fault. And before we even get into things specifically, I just gotta say, this whole argument gets a big who cares from me. Perhaps you could argue that Boyega had a slightly harder time growing up, but that difference really isn't as dramatic as this article and the left supporting this logic really leads on. First, they try and pretend Daisy is some kind of insider in entertainment, but instead of being thrust onto stage by a close, immediate family relative like what's implied, really just happened to have a great uncle and grandfather who happened to work at the BBC, Britain's main TV station and entertainment center, years ago. But for all we know, Daisy could have not even met those relatives. And the implication that her grandfather working in engineering at BBC back in the 1950s would somehow help Daisy become an actor 60 years later, an actor in a completely different country's movie franchise, well, that's a pretty big stretch. Next, for John Boyega's side, they clearly try and play up his struggle, even though for all we know, he could have had rich connected parents too. Just because they're immigrants doesn't mean they're poor and victims. That's assumed to be true here, but it's just not. Not all immigrants are poor and helpless, and not all of them can't get connected to the BBC too. And also, John Boyega getting a hardship fund or scholarship or whatever that means, that's not that big a deal either. Even middle class or well-off people can apply for benefits like this, but perhaps there was a hardship rule here that only accepts poor applicants or something, but as I said earlier, who really cares? At this point, we're splitting hairs because both of these actors did end up in the same place. They're starring in Star Wars movies, and although they had slightly different backgrounds, they're clearly not as dramatically different as the left would have you believe. If John Boyega, say, survived lung cancer while making ends meet by selling fruit and making little hats out of paper, selling them on the streets as a kid, well, if he grew up in a London ghetto, maybe we'd have a better case here. And if Daisy's parents directly cast her and made her a movie star at a young age, and she didn't have talent helping her out, well, then we'd have a different point. But Daisy's a good actor who got there on her own. So with that said, I think you guys get the point. Next, another article from Digital Spy has more details on this story, and they have more disparaging anti-Daisy tweets to go over too. Check this out. Ridley was asked if her background, including private boarding school and relatives who are established in the industry, has helped her to navigate the world of celebrity easier than her peers. The star replied, "The privilege I have? How? No, genuinely, how?" When reporter Nosheen Iqbal explained she meant in terms of class and wealth and wasn't criticizing her, Ridley went on to suggest that her experiences weren't too dissimilar to those of her co-star John Boyega. Boyega, who plays Finn in the franchise, was raised in South London by British Nigerian immigrant parents and applied for a hardship fund to join Theatre Peckham. Well, no, John grew up on a council estate in Peckham, and I think me and him are similar enough that no, the actress continued. Wow, I gotta admit, I'm as charmed about Daisy Ridley here as ever. Her ignorance of the whole privilege issue and situation is rather wholesome to watch, actually. It's a good kind of ignorance too, because, of course, privilege is largely overblown in this day and age. So to see her respond sounding shocked and dumbfounded by the suggestion, as she should, well, it's really a good read and good to see. And it kind of even warms my heart here. Mad props to Daisy for standing up for herself a bit like this too. I don't doubt she may have to backpedal and apologize for this later because of the high profileness of this movie she's in, but at least she tried pushing back against the leftists here. I think a lot of this comes from her realizing they're trying to downplay and take away her own accomplishments. As I said from the beginning, privilege is a way for SJWs to tell white people, hey, you're not special and you don't deserve what you have because all of your life and your family's success is based on you and everyone being racist. This, of course, strips us of our agency, and also it discounts all the hard work we must still do despite them thinking everything is easy for us. Over on Twitter, people aren't impressed at all by her statements and took the opportunity to share their disappointment. Just be warned, there's some strong language ahead. CEO of Keanu Reeves at Existing For Now tweets, disappointed but not surprised by Daisy Ridley. These are the results you get when you create a context in which upper middle class get to succeed and the privilege is especially apparent in the UK's performance industry. Well, now it just sounds like they're hating well-off, rich, or successful people now. Like sure, Daisy wasn't born on the streets with no parents or family, and her being born into a family who had jobs and money obviously was going to help her while growing up. But it's also not everything needed to become a big and famous actor. A good performer, a hard worker, or talented artist, or say a great heart surgeon, they can still overcome adversity and make their dreams come true. In addition, there's a bit more to this than the lefties will lead on, honestly and straightforwardly. I mean, are we just going to sit here and pretend that parents don't have everything to do with this? For example, if your parents are rich or even just well off or hardworking, well, if they're prepared to bring children into the world, then those kids have every right to benefit from that good foundation that their family set up for them. And on the other side, if you only had one or zero parents, God forbid, and well, if your family didn't bring you into a world that was a good place that prepared you for success, well, that's kind of deserved in a way too. It's hard to say it without sounding like I'm victim blaming, and I'm not trying to blame the kids here. I'm just saying your parents and how they bring you into the world and into what situation, that obviously matters. And it's not based on racism or luck. It's based on the parents doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing. So instead of chastising richer, more well-off families who are ready to have kids and have prepared them for success, well, we really should be turning to the poorer, less well-off people and encouraging them to do better too, and to save their money and to find better partners who will stick around when they have kids and raise them right when you can. In the end, perhaps you could continue to split hairs here and debate who has more or less privilege, but that doesn't really matter. I think Daisy and other so-called privilege havers, they often are mischaracterized and misrepresented, like what's happening with Ridley today. Sure, she might have had a better house and got into a better school at some point, but that's not all that life and acting and getting a job is about. Daisy still had to work hard, train, practice, and audition over and over again, just like how any other actor out there does. So, to see the left bash her and use their typical racist anti-white attacks against her, well, it is really hard to watch. What do you guys think? Is Daisy Ridley as privileged as they say? Is John Boyega as much of a victim as they say? Or is this all just exposing the extremely racist and biased ways with which the SJWs view white people versus minorities? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.